out snacks shortly. Stand by. The 2021 Ford Explorer, with available seating for up to 7 and standard intelligent four-wheel drive. It's travel redefined. Right now, get 0.99 months on most new 2021 Explorer models. For details, contact your Toronto area Ford dealer or visit.
Global News, I'm Safia Pervani. Canada is pausing next week's planned distribution of the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine after learning part of them were manufactured at a Maryland facility, which messed up the ingredients in 15 million doses bound for the American market.
The Emergent Biosolutions facility in Baltimore was recently cited by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for violations, including cleaning and sterilization failures, the potential for cross-contamination, and failure to follow required protocols. Health Canada had already cleared 1.5 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine made at the facility, but did not think the Canadian Johnson & Johnson doses had any connection planned. Now Health Canada says the drug substance that makes up part of the vaccine was actually produced there and then shipped elsewhere for the vaccines to be finished. Health Canada says it is working to determine if the 300 doses shipped to Canada meet the required safety standards. Laurie Paris, The Canadian Press.
The United States has announced it's restricting travel from India starting May 4th, citing a devastating rise in COVID-19 cases within the country and the emergence of potentially dangerous variants of the virus.
Vice President Kamala Harris defending the U.S.'s new travel ban on India, which goes into effect May 4th.
People are worried. No question. People are worried.
India is experiencing an explosion of COVID cases and deaths. The White House and Pentagon sending critical aid as the country's healthcare system reaches the brink of collapse. In the meantime, the White House says it's following advice from the CDC to restrict most travel from the country. The World Health Organization says India accounted for more than a third of all globally reported COVID-19 cases last week. Andrew Dimber, ABC News, Washington.
A panic-driven stampede is to blame for dozens of deaths at a religious ceremony in Israel. At least 45 people were killed, dozens more hospitalized during a celebration at Mount Meron. Reporter James Longman has more.
The Lag BaOmer festival usually attracts over 300,000 people, but because of COVID, authorities had asked people to stay away. They'd expected 10,000, 100,000 arrived. The site, remote and unprepared, barricades to ensure social distancing ended up fencing people in. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the site, was met with anger by a community who feel the police were slow to react.
A strong earthquake has struck off northern Japan, shaking buildings in Tokyo. No risk of a tsunami and no immediate reports of injuries or damage. Japanese officials say the quake measured 6.6 and hit at a depth of 36 miles. It was centered off the coast of Miyagi Prefecture in northern Japan, the area devastated by the massive earthquake and tsunami in March 2011 that left around 20,000 people dead. The Nuclear Regulation Authority has reported no abnormalities at nuclear plants. Over in entertainment, the Grammys are singing a different tune about a controversial awards nomination process.
Many said it was the reason The Weeknd was controversially snubbed at the Democratic Republic of Congo. The president has informed the Council of Ministers of his decision to proclaim, in line with the constitution, a state of siege in the province of Northern Kivu and Ituri. The aim is to swiftly put an end to the insecurity which every day is decimating our fellow citizens in that part of the country.
World News from the BBC. The Pentagon says the Biden administration is cancelling the construction of Donald Trump's wall along the US-Mexican border. The spokesman said this would free up money to go to other construction projects by the US military, such as schools for the children of soldiers. Building the wall was a key policy of Mr. Trump, which he argued was needed to stop illegal immigration. The European Union has condemned Russia's decision to put 2 senior EU officials on its latest blacklist, banning them from entering Russia. An EU statement said the move was unacceptable. The 2 blocked officials are the President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli, and the European Commission Vice President, Vera Jourova. Russia's foreign ministry accused the EU of pursuing a policy of illegitimate restrictions against Russians. A World Trade Organization meeting has failed to agree on a proposal to waive patent rules for pandemic-related products. The 60 countries who are backing the waiver say it would allow more companies to produce vaccines without being limited by intellectual property laws. But the plan, suggested by South Africa and India, has been opposed by mainly developed economies. They argue that it might stop voluntary collaborative efforts to increase supplies of goods like vaccines. The organisers of the Grammy Awards have scrapped their anonymous
Brazil,
voting
Russia,
committees
India, China,
following
South
allegations of
Africa.
rigging. Emily Haller reports.
France and
For
Germany made some
decades,
type of
Grammy
deal with
nominations
Russia.
have been chosen by a small secret group of experts, kept anonymous to stop them being influenced, but also shielding them from criticism. From now on, thousands of members will vote on the awards to try to make the process fairer. A former Grammys chief executive has claimed the voting process was corrupt, and several...
And the warmth, the hospitality, just everything about Calgary and every other part of Alberta I got to visit just blew my mind, okay? Now, maybe it's because I was from a relatively cold city. And I'm not talking about the thermometer, but Montreal is a relatively cold city. I had no idea that the kind of warmth that I got from Albertans was available to me. This has nothing to do with me being on the radio. I'm just talking about someone living in Alberta.
Could you speak
I
English?
mean, often when I think about my very first experience with Alberta in '74, and I think about all this stereotypical stuff about the rednecks and the hardcore conservatives and hardcore reactionaries and all that, I'm not saying that doesn't exist,
V8 motors?
because obviously there are strains of that, and certainly gets into the politics, and I don't want to beat a dead horse on that. But for someone who came from a much more liberal environment, which is what Montreal is politically, okay, much more liberal than Calgary, certainly. As far as people being open-minded to new people, welcoming new people, welcoming new ideas, I'm just about real people living in that part of the world, Calgary and southern Alberta. I mean, there's just no comparison between how I was treated in Calgary compared to my hometown. So yes, I fell in love with the West, and specifically Calgary and southern and central Alberta in my first tour of duty there in January, February, March, April, May, June of 1974. And then I moved to Vancouver for a couple of months, and then I came back to work in Montreal for a number of years, then moved to the Toronto area, where I spent a good deal of time, and then eventually got back west and went to Winnipeg. I did 7 years there, and then, not surprisingly, when Calgary called asking me if I wanted to launch talk radio, 1989, 1990, and that's why I've got this special feeling for that part of the world. So when I get people calling me from that part of the world saying I'm unfair to Alberta, and I realize that not no one person speaks for all of Alberta or any other province. I get some people saying you were unfair this week to the deputy speaker.
He's so far opposed a national lockdown, which critics say is needed to break the cycle. He's pushed the program for phase 3, where now people who are above the age of 18 years will be eligible for jabs. And this adds another 600 million more people to the vaccination cycle. But only 6 states in India will be rolling this initiative. Many are calling it tokenism because there is a shortage of vaccine in the country, and this despite India being world's largest vaccine manufacturer.
Yes, indeed, it is a huge manufacturer. Davina Gupta live for us on the newsroom program from Delhi. Thank you for that. Up to 9,000 Australians that are currently in India have been banned from returning to their homeland. Since the beginning of the pandemic, many Australians have been stranded overseas after Canberra introduced robust restrictions on international travel. But none have faced such strict measures as these, as our Sydney correspondent Phil Mercer told me.
Australia has taken a hardline stance towards COVID-19 right from the start. Foreign nationals were banned from this country in March of last year, and this is thought to be the first time that Australians have been banned from their own country. Now, from Monday, anyone who's been in India for the last 2 weeks will be banned from Australia. There is the threat of 5 years in prison and a substantial fine. And the government is saying that these drastic measures are needed because of what it's describing as the unmanageable number of Australian citizens arriving home with COVID-19.
Quite a few Australian cricketers taking part in the Indian Premier League out there at the moment. Are they just going to have to sit tight for another few weeks or months until things calm down a bit in India? How does it work?
Well, this ban on arrivals from India will be reviewed in the middle of May. So those Australian cricketers in the IPL will have to stay put. We do understand that some passengers, including a couple of Australians leaving the Indian Premier League early, did manage to circumvent an earlier ban on direct flights between India and Australia by going via Qatar. That loophole, according to the government, has now been closed. And of course, it's not just Australian cricketers who are stranded, and we do understand that among that group of more than 9,000 Australians in India, there are about 650 people who are considered to be vulnerable.
Australians are famous for traveling around the world and making homes all over the world. What do they make of this fairly draconian new rule?
Well, critics of the government's measures say that, in effect, Australia is abandoning its citizens in India. The Indian community here in Australia is large and vast. It says that the government's stance is disproportionate to the threat posed by returning travellers. And they also point to what they consider to be inconsistencies with responses to previous surges in coronavirus in parts of Europe and the United States.
Phil Mercer in Sydney. Now to the rainforest known as the lungs of the earth. For years, environmentalists have sought to protect the Amazon basin because it absorbs billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the air, helping to slow global warming. But a comprehensive international study has now revealed that the Brazilian part of the Amazon has emitted 20% more CO2 than it absorbed over the past decade. The authors of the report say that this is the first time it's been possible to show that the Brazilian Amazon is now a net emitter of greenhouse gases. The study says the situation is likely to get worse as the rate of destruction of the forest in Brazil has increased fourfold since President Jair Bolsonaro took office 2 years ago. Our chief environment correspondent, Justin Rolat, has sent this report. Brazil's environmental police are under attack. Loggers and farmers throw bottles and block roads.
You should shoot every last one
of an intensifying war.
I swear to God, they'll throw them back with blood, piss, and gas.
This year has seen the highest levels of destruction for a decade. Around 4,200 square miles of forest have been cut. Now, a senior environmental officer has told the BBC his force's efforts are being undermined by the Brazilian government.
It has become guerrilla warfare. In places where we didn't have incidents in the past, now loggers, prospectors, squatters are rioting. They feel they have the support from the government.
The Brazilian government has been accused of rolling back environmental protection. Here's Brazil's environment minister speaking in a cabinet meeting last year. We have the chance at this moment when the media's attention is almost exclusively on COVID and not the Amazon, he says. While things are quiet, let's do it all at once and change all the rules. He later said he actually meant simplify the rules.
We just landed a helicopter and the officers are going over to the truck here, which clearly has been it's got freshly cut logs on it.
I was with the environmental police on a raid on an illegal sawmill in 2014. Back then, the force was much better funded. Officers say it could be assured of backup from the local police and army and had a free hand to destroy the equipment used for deforestation. Brazilian environmental groups say the effects are clear from the statistics. Fines for deforestation were down 42% between 2019 and 2020. Funding for the environmental police has been reduced by 27% over the last year, Meanwhile, deforestation is up by 34%. The Brazilian government told the BBC it takes protecting the Amazon very seriously. It says poverty is the biggest enemy of the environment. It acknowledged local officials have sometimes withdrawn police protection for environmental officers, but says this is not official policy. And it says the rules on burning the equipment loggers and farmers use have not changed. But environmentalists say actions speak louder than words.
Deforestation rates are going up. Indigenous lands are being invaded. So don't listen to empty words. Let us look at the facts.
Our environmental police source said the cuts in funding and resources, together with the challenges of COVID-19, meant when we spoke in January, there were no environmental police officers patrolling the Amazon. Justin Rowlatt. And David has some other stories from our news desk.
The Pentagon says the Biden administration is cancelling the construction of Donald Trump's wall along the US-Mexican border. The spokesman said this would free up money to go to other construction projects for the US Army, such as schools for the children of soldiers. A British actress is suing the rock musician Marilyn Manson, alleging he assaulted and raped her. Esme Bianco, who appeared in Game of Thrones, said Manson had lured her from London to Los Angeles with the promise of work, only to subject her to violence at his home. The artist has rejected multiple allegations of abuse against him as horrible distortions of reality. And Spotify's most popular podcast host, Joe Rogan, has backpedaled on his comments that young, healthy people should forego the COVID jab. After drawing backlash, Rogan said the vaccines were safe, but he still didn't explicitly say young people needed them. Experts say everyone over the age of 16 should get the jab.
Thank you, David. The Grammys are regarded as the Oscars of the music industry, the most prestigious.
Is there anything wrong with what the Canadians are doing in that particular story, going to Muncie, Indiana? Of course, we've got Canadians going to all kinds of places, usually very, very close to the Canada-U.S. border to get vaccinated. Is there anything wrong with that? I have a hard time condemning Canadians for wanting to get as healthy as possible as soon as possible. And I don't think that they're taking any positions here. I don't think they're occupying any positions here. People say, well, that's jumping the queue. Well, not really. They're not preventing someone else here from getting the vaccine. They're not delaying their ability by crossing the border. So I personally can't blame Canadians for doing that if that's something they can do. What do you think? 1-877-399-9898 is our number. Cross-border vaccinations. What do you think? 1-877-399-9898.
How are they crossing the border?
Please give us your location
wondering.
And your first name. 1-877-399-9898. That's Canadian common sense in the greatest country on earth. I just wish we had more inventory. This is Charles Antler tonight.
Everyone deserves to have a roof over their heads and food in their belly.
I want a cabriolet. These bees in the center of a trillium are necessary to pollinate the plant, and this ensures its reproduction. It's a bee in a trillium. This is from 1970. An ant cleaning its antenna on the tooth of a dead muskrat will later help to carry away tiny bits from the dead animal. I'm just trying to find out how much water there is in the fucking lake. Yeah, what? Not enough.
Interac e-transfer transactions, an annual credit card fee waiver on select credit cards, and a $300 welcome bonus. It's the bank account that lets you do more.
You're going to find a way to get that 300 somehow.
From this year, all of the nominees will be selected by the entire voting membership of the Academy, some 11,000 voters. And it also stresses that more...
Oh, damn it.
Say the whole month, 一整年, the whole year. So
minute each other very nicely. Coming up next, we have Bracing the Chill, which is the theme song from the 2017 fantasy TV series Eternal Love for 3 Lives, 3 Worlds.
Right.
You're doing great, son. The first time you went on a date.
Picture Academy that chooses the Oscars. There are
Your first job. Welcome to the firm, son. Your first drink. Your last drink. If you drink, please don't drive. A message from Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
People don't talk.
At
You
Global
drink, don't
News,
talk.
we go beyond the headlines and the hashtags.
In this city, there's such a divide.
People are angry. The middle class has been eviscerated. We fight for you.
How come you're still taking money from people and not doing the work?
And make your story our story.
So how is the community dealing with this flooding?
We all come out and we help out piling sandbags on the shore. Global News believes in a greater Toronto. Weeknights at 5:30 with Alan Carter and Farah Nasser.
I want to thank Global News for being there for us.
Divorce can bring out the worst in human behavior. If you're worried about losing your children, selecting the right lawyer will have a major effect on your case and your life. Brian Ludmer understands your situation. With extensive experience in both family law and business law, Brian Ludmer, author of The High Conflict Custody Battle, offers a better perspective on solutions so that your children don't suffer in the process. And that makes him the ideal choice. Brian Ludmer. Visit ludmerlaw.com. That's ludmerlaw.com. At True Tone Electronics, we know this has been a difficult time for everyone. Your safety is our #1 priority. Our showroom is currently closed, but our professional staff are available via email at sales@truetone.ca or by phone at 905-270.
All right, bye. That was Harold. He heard about George.
It's possible your brother might go over to his place.
No, that's the last place he'd go.
What if you could give us his address, please?
Well, sure, I can give it to you. I know that George wouldn't go there, though.
Why are you so sure, ma'am?
I told you about the birthday party. Well, George and Harold were there, just a family sort of thing. At least it started out that way. The way it finished was awful. George and Harold got into a big fight. They were always arguing.
What if you get that picture for us now, Miss Carroll?
Oh, yes, right away. It's here someplace. Harold just said that we should have put George in an institution a long time ago. Should have had him helped. I guess he's right. This is all my fault.
Why do you say that, ma'am?
Well, it was me that didn't want George committed. I was the one who fought against it. I was so sure that everything would work out all right. Oh, here it is.
Yes, ma'am.
That's George. He got a paper hat on. He's come out of one of those little snapper things. George liked things like that, kid things. I guess he never grew up.
Yes, ma'am.
Always lived in a dream world. Made it up himself. Thought that everybody was persecuting him, that people were after him. It's so silly it wasn't true.
I'm afraid it is, ma'am.
What?
We're after him.
Some people call it vaccine tourism. What do you think? 1-877-399-9898. Trucker Kevin says at this point, I really don't care where a person gets their vaccine, just get it safely. Trucker Kevin, based in Airdrie. Kevin in Ontario says the problem is the contacts, less flying, less staff needed, etc. We need people at home, but that seems for a lot of people to be a difficult concept. Let me go to Frank in Winnipeg. Frank, you're up next on Charles Answer tonight.
Yes, good evening. I think it's perfectly fine and quite realistic for Canadians to get the vaccine wherever they can. And to be quite blunt about it, Canadians wouldn't be in this predicament if our Prime Minister looked after the citizens of this country as he's obligated to, but certainly he hasn't done that. He pretends to, but if he had procured enough vaccine earlier on, as other countries did, we wouldn't be in this mess. So
Frank, I'm not objecting to what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. I just want to move on from that because that's kind of a given. We've discussed that 1,000 times. I just want to take this forward.
I know my phone
Frank,
is
you're
spying on me.
Okay, one of my adopted hometowns. Okay,
I think I'm in Gatineau.
You're
actually
close to North Dakota, and I you know this, but I'm pointing it out for the national audience. You right now are about an hour from the U.S. line. Here's my question: if Brian Pallister is totally okay with a whole bunch of Manitobans going to North Dakota right now to get vaccinated, why would the average individual living in Winnipeg have any problem doing the same?
I can't see why they would. That should be, I think, if they don't fit the criteria for the age criteria for the allowances for getting the vaccine in their local town, if they can get it in an expedited fashion across the border, that is, I think, very reasonable, and every Canadian, every Manitoban should do that.
Now, for people listening to 680 CJOB in North Dakota, and there are many, I just want to say this as a Winnipeg expat, whatever you want to call me, just call me a Canadian. Just call me Chuck. I want to thank the people of North Dakota for offering as much vaccine as Canadians coming in from Manitoba want to have. I just want to thank you so much for that kind of American hospitality and generosity. And Frank, I want to thank you for leading off our conversation tonight. Thank you so much. All the best to you and your family. We're going to take more calls on the other side of this in just a few moments. The central question here is, and it's an ethical one, okay? Is there anything wrong with the Canadian going across the border to get vaccinated, whether it's for both doses or that second dose? Anything wrong with making sure that you've got 2 vaxes in you, 2 jabs, within 21 to 28 days? And if it means going across the line, coming back, doing your self-quarantine for 2 weeks, is there anything wrong with that idea? 1-877-399-9898. If you want to email me, that's easy. Charles at charlesadlertonight.ca. And by the way, you can get a podcast of the show every single day in your phone just by going to your favorite.
Laid off due to COVID-19? You are entitled to full severance pay if you're not recalled to work by your employer.
So one of the callers was asking about how there's different flu shots every year. We're going to need boosters every year. And then Chuck asked the doctor about Canada buying booster shots, and then I rebooted the machine. I didn't wait for an answer.
Public safety issue. I'm gonna get this town on my side. Yeah, there's something happening in that town. So much drama.
Rutherford Falls, all new back-to-back, Thursdays on Showcase, also available on Stack TV.
It was a rainy day when Pizzaville announced the Medium Gourmet Pizza Special. Get a medium gourmet pizza for just $13.99. That's like flying first class.
Department 97, Superior Court of the State of California, in and for the County of Los Angeles. In a moment, the results of that trial. Now, here is our star, Jack Webb.
Thank you, George.
Sell you drugs,
I sure hope you were listening real close to what George Fenneman had to say tonight, because it proves what I always tell you. You can't beat the premium quality you get in Chesterfields, regular or king size. I'd like you to try Chesterfields. They're much milder and they have a wonderful taste.
The case of George Hoyt Kennedy was referred to the city attorney. Due to the mental condition of the suspect, the case was then referred to the psychopathic detail at Georgia Street Receiving Hospital. After due process in Superior Court, the suspect was committed to a mental institution for treatment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to thank the editors and readers of TV Radio Mirror magazine for their awards to Dragnet, and their 6th annual award issue, now on sale at your newsstand.
Seen this movie before. Crises? What crises? There'll be another one, but you need a steady hand to get through them. I've proven it. Visit us at wolfgangklein.com. Any questions? Give me a call.
Elevators. They're not something we give much thought to, but when they're not operating correctly, it can cause serious disruptions. That's why CEE Elevator will set up a maintenance program to minimize or eliminate unnecessary downtime. During these pandemic times, your elevator needs to operate efficiently.
Program of the World Service with me, Joe Lynham. Stay well.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the U.S. is made possible by American Public Media, producer and distributor of award-winning public radio content. APM, American Public Media, with support from Benchmark ESG, enhancing operational, environmental, social, and governance business performance through best practice cloud software for 2 decades. BenchmarkDigitalESG.com. King size for natural filtering. The team of quality for a much.
Spence Diamonds. Find us in Vaughan, Scarborough, and Mississauga.
Welcome to Cooking Naked. I'm your host, Brenda Stewart, and I'm completely nude right now in my kitchen. I don't usually cook bacon naked, but today I'm cooking with Lou's Kitchen double smoked back bacon. With over 85% less fat than regular side bacon, it's safe to cook naked. Oh, hey Dave. I didn't think you'd be home so soon.
Oh, hey, Brenda, but that's bacon.
Lou's Kitchen, babe. It's the bacon you can cook naked.
Really? Who knew?
Lou's Kitchen double smoked back bacon. Find it today at Sobeys, Loblaws, Walmart, and Metro. Compared to the national brand's 54-gram regular side bacon.
Changes made to your job due to COVID-19? New regulations in Ontario haven't suspended your rights. If your pay has been cut or you've been put on a temporary layoff, you can still take action. Get what you're owed. Go to Employment Lawyer.
You guys are serious about getting clients, like, just, you need us for something. You need our help.
Is at the new low price. Chesterfield regular.
Fuck off.
Introduced COVID-19 vaccines to Canada next week. Canada has tightly woven commercial ties with the United States, but it has been getting Pfizer's vaccines from Belgium until now, as U.S. authorities had kept supplies made at home for domestic use. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau repeated on Friday, Canada will be getting 2 million doses a week. Legislation that would force 1,150 employees at the Port of Montreal back to work has passed in the Senate. The House of Commons had already approved the bill with the support of the Conservatives and the minority Liberal government. The Senate adopted Bill C-29, the Port of Montreal Operations Act, Friday night. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says the bill is an attack on the constitutional right to strike. Ottawa says the legislation still allows both sides to settle their dispute through mediation or arbitration. Victims killed in a mass shooting at a FedEx warehouse will be remembered Saturday during a public ceremony at the football stadium where the Indianapolis Colts play. The 3-hour event is expected to draw thousands to Lucas Oil Stadium. It comes 2 weeks after a former FedEx employee fatally shot 8 people, including 4 members of the city's Sikh community. Afghan officials say the death toll in a suicide truck bombing that struck a guest house in eastern Logar province has risen to at least 21, with as many as 90 others injured. The Interior Ministry says the attack happened Friday night in Pule Alam, which is the capital of the province. No one has immediately claimed responsibility. No indication why the guest house was targeted. From the Global News Desk, I'm Safia Parani.
This is Charles Adler Tonight. Once again, here is Charles Adler.
So we're talking about vaccine tourism and cross-border vaccinations. And of course,
yes, but Sergeant Preston.
Well, you didn't say what you wanted for, Doc. Do I have to explain I'm not a murderer? This the U.S. Marshal's office?
Yeah, that's right. Come on in, mister.
I got something to tell you, Marshal.
Okay.
First, you better say my name. Emmett Dooley.
All right, Dooley.
Now, for what I got to tell you.
Controversial. I mentioned Brian Pallister a few moments ago, the Premier of Manitoba. And so you're wondering, what's he doing with North Dakota? What's this all about? People in Manitoba know the Snorri Code, but people in the rest of the country may not. Manitoba teachers and other school employees will be able to get vaccinated in the United States. Okay, so this is coming right from the Premier of Manitoba. And of course, they'd be doing it in North Dakota, as I was mentioning it earlier. An agreement was announced last week that allows Manitoba truck drivers who regularly cross the border into North Dakota to get vaccinated in the U.S. This will now be extended to teachers and other school workers, including janitors and administrators. Pallister says we want to make sure those schools are safe. So the person will go to the border, that's right, they'll cross the border, get a vaccine, and they must immediately come back. They are not going shopping in Grand Forks, North Dakota. They're just going for the vaccine. He suggested, this is the Premier of Manitoba, he suggested a possible cross-border vaccination site for teachers could be near the border, which is Emerson, Manitoba. That's the border crossing. That's one of the border crossings. Another could be at the International Peace Garden that straddles the Canada-U.S. border near Boisevine in southwestern Manitoba. Anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds there either, but that's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of thing that they're doing. And I'm simply saying, when the premier of a province is doing it, albeit doing it in a relatively restricted way, naturally it gives a lot of people thought to doing something very, very similar and going to the United States and coming back and self-isolating for a couple of weeks, but getting those vaccines as soon as possible. This is Terry Lynn calling in from Camrose, Alberta. Terry Lynn, you're up on Charles Adler tonight.
That was 45 minutes ago. She was going to bring out callers.
I just want to say that, you know, I believe in you should get vaccinated. The only thing I'm worried about is, like, you know, I was going through the whole line up at the Expo Center, got my AstraZeneca thing, you know, when they did the walk-in clinic. I'm 54 years old. And talk to everybody. Everybody's there for a different reason. This one's for a job, this one's this one's blah, blah. When I was about fifth in line, my heart started to beat so quick. I got so excited. I could not believe how excited I got. I can remember listening, because I listened to 6:30 Chad, I was listening to the morning show. I think it was Shay Ganem, and they're like, hey, you're not Superman after the first thing. Don't think you're this. I'm like, I'm already feeling like Superman. I'm only fifth in line. I'm thinking, if I can do that across the border, I'm not worried about COVID anymore. I'm worried about my heart stopping. I'm just going to be so excited that I could do this in both places and spare people's lives. I did. You would not believe how excited I was. And
what do you mean I won't believe it? Can't you tell I've been excited for the last 10 days because I've had I've had the first shot? I'm tremendously excited. I'm just right now. I'm just a little. I'm sorry.
I could barely spell my name. I was so excited. They're asking me questions.
Tim Lynn, thank you very much for the call, and I'm glad you're excited about getting as healthy as possible. Mark in Newmarket, Ontario. Charles, I would highly recommend to anyone to get the vaccination as soon as they're eligible. I am 59 years young, says Mark, and I have to settle for something less than the gold standard, but I'm sleeping better now. I guess what he means is he got the AZ or AZ, the AstraZeneca. My son had to travel to the United States, he says, and return to Canada for very self-discretionary reasons and quarantine in our basement for 14 days. He had inspectors arrive here. This is Newmarket, Ontario. He had inspectors arrive here, but no big deal. Follow the rules, and we will get out of the mess. One more text before I go back to the phones. Chris in Surrey. Hey, Chuck, I have no problem with Canadians going south to get their shot. The only snag I could see is if there's a reaction to the shot, you won't be insured, and you would have to face the lovely, not so cheap U.S. healthcare system. Chris, thank you very much. I never thought of that. That's one of the great perks I get on the show. I get educated by our people at the kitchen table every single night. Let me get to Sandy in Surrey, BC. Sandy, you're up on Charles Adler tonight. Welcome to the kitchen table.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually don't see a big problem with it. I think if it's legal, it is essential. People are traveling to get something that is life-saving. And so it helps them and it helps us here as well. So I think it's fine. I don't think it really is a big deal.
Sandy, I'm actually shocked. I expected more people to come on tonight telling me that it's unfair for some Canadians to do things that other Canadians cannot do. I'm not getting any of that tonight. Nothing.
You know what? I think that it's human nature to get upset when people get in front, and it brings out that sort of dark side in us. But I think that one just needs to look to, you look at India right now, what they're going through, and it kind of resets your thinking a bit, and it makes you appreciate what we have in this country and the place that we live in. And it's really bad in other parts. So I think we need to reset and just keep perspective. I think that's super important in this time. And yeah, if it's allowed and people are doing, if they're doing it correctly, I don't think there's a problem. We should be happy for them. and it's safe to be around them when they come back, hopefully. So
well, it should be safe. It should be safe if they stay quarantined for a couple of weeks. That should be the case. Sandy, thank you very much for the phone call. Appreciate it. Let me take another one here from Keith in Alberta. Keith, you're up on Charles Adler tonight. We're talking about cross-border vaccination. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Charles. How are you doing?
Good.
I kind of liken this to the discussion on private clinics in Canada. A lot of people think it's unfair if people can pay and get the surgery or whatever right away, but it eases the load on the medical system. People are jumping out of the queue in front of you, and you're moving up, right? And so, same with the vaccine. Like if people are going across the border because they can get it faster, then that just kind of speeds it up for everybody else here.
Jerry, you're not going to get an argument from me. I've been for a mixed system for years. I honestly think that if we didn't have the states next door to us, we would have a mixed system because there's so many of the people who, and I have to, call it the way I see it, so many people in the Canadian, what I'll call the Canadian influence community. How's that? People who have lots of juice, lots of influence, and very often lots of money. They keep talking about how this is the greatest system in the world, and they don't want to bring in any kind of private care, even though there is lots of private care right now available. Depending on what we're talking about in Canada, it's a very mixed up system, but it still isn't the system that we have in most European countries, and frankly, most countries around the world. And if we didn't have America next door for these hypocrites to go to whenever they want to go to America to get health care, then I think we would have the same system that Belgium has and France has and Germany has, Japan and so many other countries. And the idea that if we had private hospitals that, oh my goodness, no doctor would work in a public hospital and we wouldn't have any public health care and those people would be taking up spots of people in public health care, the arithmetic there doesn't work for me. But politically, it has been to the advantage of people who run for office, whether they're conservatives or liberals or NDP, to say, no, we've got to keep it exactly the way it is, and this is the greatest system in the world. I think that's, frankly, dishonest. So you're not going to get an argument from me. Thank you so much for the call, Keith in Alberta. Let me go to the United States. Gene is standing by in Minnesota. Gene, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi there.
Now, how close are you to the line?
10 miles.
My goodness, so you're almost Canadian.
I actually am Canadian. I'm a Canadian citizen. I lived in Minnesota for about 27 years now.
What's the actual village, hamlet, town called where you happen to live in Minnesota?
It's Roseau.
Okay. And so, what's your take on cross-border vaccination then?
Yeah, I guess a concern that I want to voice is there's controversy over the Northwest Angle portion of the United States, which I'm not sure how many people understand where it's located, but the only way to access Northwest Angle is to travel through a portion of southeastern Manitoba. And the rules in place by the Canadian government is very, very difficult, so that people cannot travel to commute from Northwest Angle, where they live, to Minnesota through that stretch of land. And it's forced many of those business owners, people that live there, to actually follow the guidelines to come here for whether it's grocery shopping, medical, or whatever. They end up having to follow the rules on the Canadian side, which I believe now is to go overnight somewhere within Manitoba, stay overnight, get a negative COVID test before they can return back to Northwest Angle. And I just kind of think, well, kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, where if you can come here for a COVID shot, the government should relax a little bit and allow those people that live there to commute through, that portion of the Canadian land that road is on. So,
do you think if neighbors were involved? When I say neighbors, the people in Minnesota, or the people who run Minnesota, and the people who run Manitoba, do you think that the problem would disappear? Do you think the problem is the federal government wants to have the rules applied everywhere, that regardless of this particular unique situation you're talking about, and there's some other unique situations that are similar? Do you think this is this is basically an Ottawa deal?
I believe so, because it seems like they don't want to cater to the small town living where people commute back and forth. It's like one rule seems to apply from East Coast to West Coast, and that's it. So it's like I haven't seen my family in over a year now, and it's just really frustrating. I mean,
and you don't see yourself as a dangerous person bringing in dangerous viruses to Canada? Even with that, using common sense of like going to check some property that I own up there, it's virtually impossible, and it's just very frustrating that in a sort of blunt way to say, we'll allow you to come here, but we can't go there. I hear you, Gene. I hear you. Thank you so much for this call, and lots of luck in us getting back to normal. I'm assuming you got your jabs, right?
I did not. I'm holding off.
Okay.
Me and my wife both did go through the COVID thing back in October, so I'm just kind of waiting to feel it out and see what happens. But it's been offered.
Thank you very much. I should not make those assumptions. I assume that anybody living where you're living with lots of access to it would get both. You went through the COVID thing. Appreciate it. We'll hear from you again down the road, no doubt. Thank you very much for pointing out some of the hypocrisy in the system that we're discussing. We're back in a moment with John Jang, but I do want to tell you that this show is produced every night by Jumi Dapo Ogunsola. Catherine Stewart was subbing yesterday, and we've got Jumi back in the saddle today and back on Monday and Tuesday of next week and every other day. And we've got Ryan Lee Hall in the techno saddle. That's right. He's our technical producer. Lady Catherine Stewart is our executive producer. John Jang and much more of what's coming up next hour on the shift right here. This is Charles Adler tonight.
If you have pain, see...
Coronavac in doubt. It wasn't just me, no. Only 4 this had no rights to doubt. I didn't know I had such strength and power with indigenous work in indigenous communities. The most indigenous people have modern cell phones now. Gee, it's a novelty for me.
A novelty for him, perhaps, but as we've heard, not really a novelty for people living in the Amazon. More than 650 indigenous people have died of COVID-19, according to the Ministry of Health.
That's really sad, but that doesn't seem like a huge number.
But there's only 500,000 indigenous people living in rural villages, so proportionally, it's very significant. It's also surprising, because these victims lived in relatively isolated communities, which, in theory, are easier to protect. In July, the country's largest indigenous organization went to court asking for a specific government plan to fight COVID-19 among indigenous groups. The Federal Supreme Court ruled that the government should create barriers around vulnerable communities, but indigenous people continue to denounce invasions, mainly by loggers and miners. WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook, says it's not responsible for the misinformation on its platform. It's encrypted, so says it doesn't have access to the content being shared. The company says they've also taken measures to stop false reports, including launching free services on COVID-19 with the World Health Organization and news verification agencies. Now, let's return to the beginning. That story about the village welcoming the helicopter with bows and arrows? A few days after the operation that tried to vaccinate the Jamamaji, a chief of one of the villages changed his mind. So the team came back and vaccinated some indigenous people.
So good news in the end.
But that's not the whole story, because most of the Jamamaji people haven't, at the time of this recording, accepted the vaccine. So there's definitely more work to be done.
Not really. The one that wanted it got it. What's wrong with that?
That's it this week for BBC Trending. My thanks to Giuliana Grignani, Giovanni Bello Neto, and our producer, Jonathan Griffin. If you want to message Trending with your thoughts on this or any of our programs, you can email me. My email is michael.wendling, WENDLING, @bbc.co.uk. The Anti-Vax Files will conclude at the same time next week.
Coffee or lunch or really any meal, and stay informed about your PM or MP or MVP on demand or with 24/7 TV app. But that was taken. What app's got it all? The new Global TV app. Download now for more global news and stream anytime, absolutely free.
Rough driving conditions can chip your windshield in the blink of an eye. At Speedy Glass, we can quickly fix that chip before it turns into a crack. Hi, I'm Keith at Speedy Glass, and my team and I use unique cutting-edge technology to get you road-ready fast. Our work comes with a lifetime warranty, and it may even be free for you if you're insured. So don't ignore that chip. Book your appointment today at speedyglass.ca. Conditions apply. Details at speedyglass.ca.
Speedy Glass Repair. Speedy Glass Replace.
With the Daily Grand Lotto, you can win $1,000 a day for life.
Wait, every
The other single institution during the entire period of the transatlantic slave trade. The new name was announced. Ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Bayes Business School. Thomas Bayes was an 18th century English statistician and clergyman, but he's not that famous even in England. Indeed, you might call him an obscure figure, if you didn't mind unleashing the wrath of maths Twitter. So today we'll be finding out about the Reverend Bayes and one of the great statistical ideas of all time, Bayes' rule. And to help us on this journey, we're joined by Sharon Birch McGrain, who wrote a book with the snappy title, The Theory That Would Not Die: How Bayes' Rule Cracked the Enigma Code, Hunted Down Russian Submarines, and Emerged Triumphant from 2 centuries of controversy. I started by asking her, who was Thomas Bayes?
Bayes was a Presbyterian minister in the 18th century. He's part of the generation that could not attend university in Oxford or Cambridge, the main English universities at the time, because he was not Church of England. This was fortunate for Bayes because he went north to Scotland, which was Presbyterian, and had a much better university in Edinburgh at the time. And there he studied theology like his father and mathematics, which was his real interest, and became an amateur mathematician.
Bayes manages to intermix his 2 interests, theology and maths. He writes at least 1 book on maths and spends a lot of his time studying the works of other mathematicians and theologians. And with this background, he starts to develop an idea.
Well, it was during a big religious controversy of can you use evidence from the natural world to prove that God exists. And he comes up with a really simple one-line theorem that we call Bayes' rule now, that's for dealing with incomplete data. And he said something that appealed to me greatly, that it's all right to start out with a half-baked idea about a situation, as long as you relentlessly modify your initial ideas every single time a new piece of information appears. He gives us mathematical reasoning for highly uncertain
my whole life like that.
situations.
But Thomas doesn't publish his work. Instead, it lies amongst his papers.
It was actually buried by Bayes. He didn't believe enough in it to publish it. He buries it in his records, paperwork. A friend of his, another dissenting minister who's an amateur mathematician, spends 2 years editing it, gets it published.
It's now out in public. But what really gives it prominence is its development by the great French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace. Laplace formalizes Bayes' insight and shows clearly how it can be applied. But after Laplace dies in 1827, his formula for Bayes' rule falls into disrepute. Partly this seems to be a suspicion of all things French, but there was something deeper, a suspicion of how Bayes' rule worked. Remember, the Bayesian approach says you can start with a subjective estimate of a probability, any probability, regardless of whether there's any data. How likely is it that God exists? Will the new coronavirus mutate to render vaccines useless? What's the chance of a nuclear war before the 1st of January 2030? Then, having started with what's little more than a guess, we use Bayes' rule to revise our opinion as new data comes in.
The time on their hands and the opportunity to fly into the U.S., get vaccinated, and fly back. Can you, just as a Canadian, are you condemning that kind of behavior, praising it? Are you neutral? Where are you at on that, John?
You know, it's hard for me to condemn it because at the end of the day, they're trying to do the right thing by getting the vaccine. And getting the vaccine is one of the best levels of serving your community right now. So it's actually a roundabout good thing. However, it seems more advantageous to those that are a little bit more well off financially because it's not cheap to just go on a plane. And there is that 2-week quarantine. So obviously you'd have to take time off work. So not every Canadian could do it, Charles. But with that said, I'm just like you. You know, I want to follow the rules. There were even 30-plus AstraZeneca pop-up vaccines in the Lower Mainland over the past week, as I know you know, Charles. And even though that they were available, I didn't choose to go and attend one of those clinics because, again, they were outside of my immediate health authority. And if there was one in Vancouver Coastal, I would obviously go and happily sign and wait in line for that. But because it was out in the Fraser Valley, it didn't apply to me, so I didn't feel compelled to go.
I find it easy to condemn Canadians who try to create as much vaccine hysteria as possible, who tell people, no, go do your research before you, especially if they're public officials. That's easy for me to condemn. If someone is discouraging people from taking vaccines or putting doubt in their minds, I'll condemn that all night long. But it's difficult for me to condemn people who want to get access to the vaccines as soon as possible. In 20 seconds or less, John Jang, what have you got coming up?
Yeah, we're introducing a brand new regular contributor on The Shift on the weekend edition, Nicole Haley, our dating expert, to talk all things love. That's tonight.
All things love?
Yeah, that's right.
What a concept. All things love. If that doesn't...
As they arrived, Sharon says this helped lead to the cracking of the code. It now has many other practical applications.
It was used by a lot of other people who had to make decisions quickly. Once they got computers, it just exploded. And today it's used for genetics to detect subtle differences in DNA and proteins. According to Bill Gates, it was the foundation of Microsoft's success, was using Bayes, Google, Wall Street hedge funds, medicine, and wildlife protection, brain studies, translating foreign languages. It's been embedded, it's overlapped with computer science, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So it's just everywhere. You can't escape it now. It may not be exactly as Bayes did it, but it's been modernized and it's incredibly useful. There's a great quote from a British economist, Keynes.
I'm just picturing this
John
person
Maynard
as a
Keynes.
cat. This has to
He
be a
said,
cat.
when the facts change, I change my
Cats
opinion.
know shit like this.
What do you do, sir? And that's Bayesian.
One of my favourite quotes, although I'm going to break your heart, Sharon, because he never said it. Are you going to update your view of Keynes now?
Sure, I have to, of course.
That's all we have time for this week. Thank you to Sharon Birch McGray. If you want to get in touch, email more or less at bbc.co.uk. And until next week, goodbye.
This opportunity is for you. Now, Frank is looking for somebody who's not only ambitious and self-motivated, but is also compassionate and wants to help people with the biggest investment of their lives, their home. Frank Leo and Associates have always prided themselves in the trust and the confidence that their clients have placed in them. And if you're ready for a fresh opportunity and a rewarding one, then Frank wants to hear from you. Just go to jointeamleo.com. That's jointeamleo.com.
Or stream on the KCRW mobile app.